Before you watch the video that you just clicked on, I want to let you guys know about the deal going on at Strength Coach Network right now in the month of December 2022. If you sign up for Fundamentals 1 or 2, you will get a year to the membership site at Strength Coach Network for free. All right, that year free usually costs people $300. I guess $299, so just under. But if you sign up for Fundamentals 1 or 2, which is the long form education resource, you're going to get a free year to the membership site, which typically costs you $299 for free if you decide to sign up in the month of December. Go ahead and check the comments below to be able to see what we're talking about and take advantage of this deal. I'm going to stop talking now so you can watch the video that you clicked on. Later. Joining us on the Cheeky Midweeky this week is Tall Alex. Go ahead and introduce yourself for those that do not know who you are.
Yeah, so my name's truly Alex Brzeski, but I was labeled Tall Alex as the result of possibly legendary, but a hellish interview process that Kier Scott.
Ooh, we are definitely talking about that.
Oh yeah, we got it. I've also stolen Mustache Alex's whole flow with my current upper lip hair, but been in strength and conditioning for, I think this is my 6th year now. Kind of got started as a result of listening to CVAS podcast. I was at the University of Iowa actually while you were there, Justin, but I was in the academic side of things, cutting mice apart, spreading out the carotid arteries and doing a bunch of academic biochemistry stuff. But as a result of that, I was trying to get into college teaching at the time, which is why I went into that master's/PhD program, but realized the process of that was going to result in me spending 60, 70 hours a week with mice and doing biochemistry things instead of working with people, which seemed backwards. If I was going to be in teaching, you'd think I would be spending more time teaching, but I digress. So I was living for Fridays when I had my discussion sections, and I had great experiences in strength and conditioning as an athlete. So listening to Jay's podcast, and this was 2015, 2016, ended up making the leap, started at Concordia St. Paul, which turned into me being the head of athletic development at Northern Lights Junior Volleyball for 2.5 years. The volleyball tenure turned into me getting the interview for the hellish interview at William and Mary, which as a result of COVID, and if you pay attention to Kier's Instagram at all, we bailed on William and Mary. So I spent a little bit of time at Elon, year at Carleton College, and then now I'm at in Washington State working with 2-2 Lancer Brigade in the H2F program.
All right, so we got a lot to unpack there. Let's just start with the interview. Like let's not bury the lead. Tell the people who have not heard about the story.
All right, so interview process, application process was relatively thorough, but it was like, for me as somebody who was not in Division I and recognized that, like that's what a lot of people look for, is like Division I experience, etc. I was at least in scholarship athletics working at Concordia St. Paul, but like for some reason there's Division I and it's like what everybody wants. So recognizing me getting that entry was going to be tough, and like I was just kind of prepared for whatever kind of slog they were going to throw at me. But initially it was like a fairly detailed like questions and stuff, which was nice because I got to show how my brain worked. It wasn't just like, this is where I worked. All right, well, it's some dog shit D2. Nobody gives a shit. It was like, no, fortunately they had a process that allowed me to like show how the inner working of my brain worked. So it's like, hey, this guy isn't just some pud that gets people under barbells. Secondary part was Zoom interview, which I mean, it was fairly detailed. Here's the questions. What do you believe the 99% of the field doesn't? And tell us something about you that, or like, what would your worst enemy say about you? And say, in my case, I'm just ornery and like I have opinions. It's just like, so it's like I had literally had a review probably 2.5 weeks before this. My boss was like, you're ornery and demanding. Like, correct.
Got it.
Yeah,
I got my answers.
Yes.
You're like,
all right.
thank
Yeah,
you.
that's. I mean, it's who I am. I'm a demanding person, and when I'm like, I get very type A about these things for some reason or other. I could be type B about a bunch of other stuff, but for some reason, strength and conditioning was always like, it's got to be A, B, C, and D. Couldn't tell you why. It's just the way it's been. But then the on-campus process, where it got fun. Got a flight out there. I was told that there was going to be something that we had to prepare for, like the night of. We would get a prompt. It was like, all right, get to the hotel, sitting at the hotel, walked down to a Waffle House at dinner. Got back to the hotel, and it was about 9 o'clock at night. Find out that the other guy's named Alex. He's staying at the same hotel I am. It's gonna be a dueling interview. Had to prep for just some like ACL return to play stuff. It was like, and this is at like 9:30 at night Eastern. So it was like, all right, well, balance sleep and planning like tight.
Getting
all
a
right.
job.
Yeah. Wake up, got the boy Anthony and his serial killer gaze awaiting me in the hotel room, which is, I mean, he's a bearded guy. I mean, he's a Midwestern guy. I've turned to
And
come
just
find out.
straight face. Yeah.
Stone face. And mustache Alex LaRochelle is he's in a suit. I'm just in a blue shirt and slacks.
Oh God, you probably
I forgot my dress shoes. I'm wearing tennis shoes, which is just true to form. Like, it's who I am. I was like, oh yeah, dress socks, dress shoes. Nah. All right, here we go. So we ride in, just shooting the shit with Tony, bitching about the field. It's just like sport coaches suck, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, all right, this is fairly normal. This is par for the course. Maybe I'm not all that far off. Get to breakfast. This is like really the start of the interview. It's like, even though it's not an interview process, but it's like, we're like the vibe. It's vibe check time, right? So the quorum's at breakfast, which he's got, like, he's a kind man. Like, I gotta put that, like, I love Eric Quorum to death. But there again, there's like a, I don't know what the word is, but it's like you're a little bit on edge, especially as an interview. Like, don't screw this up. Don't screw this up. Don't screw this up. And having that start at like 7:30 in the morning, it's like, okay. So me and Mustache Alex are sitting in a booth right next to each other. We're sitting at breakfast next to each other. Some like dense-ish questions happen, whatever. Moving on through the day, though, then we start into the actual dueling interview process, where it's like we had the ACL return to play. So I think we had like a half hour. I'm on one side of a whiteboard. He's on the other side of the whiteboard, scripted out what we're going to do. And then he presents, and then I present. And it's like the whole athletic training crew's there. They're going through, they quiz us. So it's like he gets grilled, and then I present mine, and I get grilled. We go to lunch. Scott has us sit both on the same side of a booth. It's like a little bit tight. Scott's got all the room in the world. So there's a lot of minor psychological things that I didn't even realize were going on. Like, they had planned. I was just kind of dealing with it. Just like, all right, I didn't even realize what was going on. But Kier Scott probably could tell much better background stories of the plans of the psychological warfare that they're trying to throw at us. But and then the secondary part of it, we had another presentation, same idea, both on each side of a whiteboard. We had to plan out a training session for summer for field hockey, because other Alex was also a volleyball guy. I was just coming out of being a volleyball guy. I was hiring for working with volleyball. So they just threw us a curveball and see how our brains worked with field hockey naturally. Otherwise, we'd be in our wheelhouse, and that's just too easy.
Yep.
So we got grilled on that with our programming stuff. And then after about 7 hours of interviewing, decided to train, and then got on a plane and went home.
Unbelievable. Like, where does your mind go on the plane right after that? Like,
I mean, I got to the Richmond
because I know where
airport.
mine would go. Mine would be like, here's all the things you made wrong, and this is why. Like,
for me, it was like, honestly, it was stressful. Don't get me wrong, but it's like we had seen so much of each other in that 8 hours that I knew what I was getting into. It's like by the end of it, it's like there's nothing that it's just like they're either gonna like him or they're gonna like me. I like these guys. In the event that they offer, I'm gonna say yes, because like I'd be going back to being the dumbest guy in the room again. Like, I'd be able to grow, I'd be able to, so that lights, it was like I was the driving force behind it all. So, but going there, I was going to be an opportunity to be the low man on the totem pole again and grow, because it felt a lot like my initial presentations when I was at Iowa, when I was just getting absolutely grilled by these PhDs. But it was like a growth thing. Like, frankly, I got a little bit callous to how abrasive some academics could be in these presentations. And like the way that these guys would go about it is like, yeah, they were grilling me a little bit, but it's like there's nothing I hadn't dealt with before in academia. So being able to be in a situation where I'm the dumbest guy in the room again and I can grow, or if I have a question, it's like I have a sounding board that I can get better. It's like, yeah, I've recognized that I was going to be chomping off a lot of teams there at a FCS school, and it's like the office was notably not great, but like it was going to be in a position to grow as a professional and as a person to be able to get better. So even though it was a super rigorous interview process, it was just like it was all out there. I knew exactly what I'd be getting into in the event that it happened. So like even though it was like probably by design to turn up the heat and grill me a little bit, at the same time it was so transparent about what I was getting into. It was like by Monday morning, Kier calls me at 7 o'clock. They're like, "Yeah, I want the job." There's no. I went in there thinking I was just going to be leveraging, but like the salesmanship both ways. Apparently, I did well enough to get the offer, and I enjoyed them enough that I was like, "Yes, this is what I got to do professionally. Otherwise, I'd be foolish."
I got a theoretical question, I suppose. Why
Yeah.
do you think more people don't do that? Because I heard it and I'm like, genius. Just like you said, genius.
Frankly, I think a lot of people are really bad at asking interview questions because every interview since has just been like boring. Like, I don't even get
They're like,
anymore.
walk in
It's
the
just like,
park.
what's my philosophy? Like, great, okay, well, this is just surface level. It doesn't really, it. Like, what are you actually finding out about me by saying that? Because everybody's going to say something that's about 3 or 4 degrees removed from it. It's just like, oh yeah, you really like having passionate people. Like, well, same. That is like the overall thing. It's like I like helping passionate people, whether it's teaching, strength and conditioning, whatever. But it's just like that's not actually demonstrating whether or not I'm going to bury kids with 300s the Friday before a meaningful game. Like, is he actually good at his job? I don't know.
I agree. And I think people are afraid to do it because I think they would just feel bad. Like, I don't think they want to be in that situation, so they just don't want to do it.
No, I think people are afraid to stress people sometimes. Like, especially maybe this is me coming from the Midwest. It's like it skewed my 99% answer, and it might skew that too. But it's like there's a lot of Scandinavian passive aggression in the Midwest, and people don't really want to like push the needle on it. Like it's so maybe it's just an East Coast thing, or maybe it's like because I had a mentor at Iowa who was a German MD PhD, and he could cut the knife to the center of the question. Maybe it's just a European thing, and Kira's just along the same lines, or maybe you can get away with more things if you have a European accent than if you can with a Midwest one. But I think maybe it's just a tough thing to do, or they don't have the time to do it, or I'm not sure, because time efficiency wise, if you're going to get both people on campus, you just knock out both interviews in the same day, back to back. And as a interviewee, if I had lost, it was like, all right, they just liked him more. I know exactly who he was. He was a smart professional. He's good at his job too. So it's like,
that'll make you might give you some peace.
Yeah.
So you said after you left there, you went to Elon, and so you're there with DeMarco. Like, how was that experience?
It was great. So I fell into a part-time role there just to try to keep things together. I had worked with Jordan Newsma prior at Concordia St. Paul. We had overlapped for 6 months when he was there at Concordia, and then he assisted me at Northern Lights for one club season as well, and he was interning at the University of Minnesota. So I plugged in there. That was a great time. I was able to take a lot of the things that we were trying to implement at William and Mary, and had significantly less teams when I was at Elon, so I was able to get into the details a little bit more and do, instead of being an inch deep and a mile wide, I was able to get down deep with 40 athletes instead of, I think it was 200 athletes or so at William and Mary. So being that Elon environment and what Nick has created, because I came in late, like this is probably his third year there, so like he's got a lot of established positions and how much he's grown that department. It was, quality of life was great. The area in Burlington's great. I had a bunch of time, like the amount of, like I had maybe, I think at most 10 hours of coaching a week. So then like it was a part-time job that was actually part-time in strength and conditioning, which having built that up and having the ability to work on the system instead of just being in the system, and make sure that my processes are doing well, and frankly learn names and be a happy person when these athletes come in, so it becomes a positive environment instead of it being, this is session 7 at 6:00 at night. Like,
and I don't even know my name anymore.
Yeah, like I can't string a sentence together anymore. I might be able to make a good metaphor at 10 o'clock for my second session, but by session 7 it's just read the card, please.
So you did that, but then right from there you went and you were in charge of everything with you and one assistant, right? Like,
yep. So at Carleton, I I had a half of an assistant because he was also the head baseball coach. And then fortunately, I was a decent enough human that one of my former athletes at Concordia St. Paul saw me do the classic strength coach thing, put my face in front of the Carlton logo, et cetera. Like, hey, you want an intern? I live in Dundas, which is like 10 minutes down the road. It was like, yeah, more hands the better. Yes, please, Josh. Because it's one of those athletes where it's like he'd beat me to the facility sometimes at Concordia, and for 5:30 lifts, just standing outside the door in the freezing cold. Like, hell yeah, I want that guy with me. He's like, he's always going to go through it with me. So he had essentially 1.5, but I'd kind of been like, I had driven a ship before at Northern Lights. So I was the guy at the admin table. I was that. There's the stakes. I didn't realize how high they were at the time because I did not understand what Northern Lights club volleyball was relative to it. So until much later, but working in that environment and having an idea of like everything comes back to me. It was which might have contributed to a little bit of anxiety and neuroticism with it because like it all boils down to it, frankly. But that's the way that I went through it. Like if the weight room's messy, whose fault is that? It's mine. Somebody gets hurt in the weight room, whose fault is it? It's mine. Like it's everything about the experience that happened in the basement of Laird Stadium that was not for football players using the locker room was going to come back to me in some way, shape, or form in somebody's brain. So I took that responsibility on and tried to do the best I could with it. So frankly, a lot of the sport science things that like the GPS modeling and practice periodization is like we had to kind of knock that out way early on because it's Division III and like there's not a whole lot of flexibility once it gets running. But if you know that like the fall schedule for all the fall sports gets posted 2.5 months out, so it's like, all right, well that game day -3 is going to be here and so on and so forth. Plan that out ahead of time, put that out in the schedule. So there's a lot of pre-planning to make sure that once we navigate it, we know where we're going. But once it's going, you just run it. And sometimes the off-season sport coaches don't like it, but when you're providing that to them in season when it actually counts, then they're usually pretty happy with it anyway, and they understand it.
Yeah,
But
let's stay here a little bit longer for how you handled that for any of our listeners that are Division III or running a big department without a lot of help.
yeah,
How did you, again, you had a lot of really good mentors beforehand. Talk about how you did create those systems and did plan ahead, because being type A, that definitely probably helped.
yeah. So recognizing what the demands of the sport are, but then having the framework within a session to make it all work was the main things. Like there's probably 80% of the teams ran some brand of 1x20. Like the first half of the session is going to be warm up and fast stuff or special development exercises, however you want to categorize it. Like golf doesn't need to sprint, as it turns out. Hot take.
You're wrong, and
Yeah.
mixed martial art athletes are supposed to sprint too. Okay.
Well, I mean, if they're trying to run away, which is an effective, it's the other half of fight or flight, I guess. But if you're actually trying to fight the person, then maybe not. Golfers don't need to sprint. So I didn't sprint them, but they threw a lot more med balls than anybody else on campus. Tennis doesn't need to sprint 40s. They don't need to get up the top speed mechanics, but accelerations are good. They chuck med balls. So it's like within the framework of an hour, it was a pretty standardized flow of prep, fast stuff, weight room stuff towards the end of it. And then from there, it's just like adjusting what we need to do based on where they are training age wise and what they're capable of doing. So like with football, obviously there's contact, there's a lot more muscle mass that needs to be put on. They need to sprint more. And the fact that with football being a sport that does not traditionally have off-season activities, like 7-on-7 is kind of a thing nowadays, but at Carleton, they don't have any domes. They don't have any place to do that. So it's like, I was everything with them. So I trained them the most versus men and women's soccer. They got 3 days a week because they also had futsal going on. So they had specific stuff. They had other training volume going on outside, or basketball for that matter, where they're always playing pickup. So it's like I scaled that a little bit, and also getting with their captains to make this like, when do you guys play futsal? It's like, okay, we go Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to try to sprint you the day after you play futsal for 2.5 hours because you're probably not going to be in all that great of a spot. But if we put your sprint session the day of futsal, we try to sneak you in at 3:30 before 4:30. We do the fast stuff. I might have a shorter lift that day because then we have the big bolus of off-season work, and we go from there. Tennis was like perpetually in season, it felt like, so they just went 2 days a week. So it was really just scaling based on need, which was a thought process that we initially had at William and Mary when we were trying to navigate the post-COVID situation, like your throwers, your football linemen, like they need to lift more weights than everyone else. It's like versus tennis, where it's like you can be outside and you actually can basically do full-on tennis practice despite the COVID restrictions because like there's a net in the way and you're both on the other side of the net. Baseball is the same thing where it's just like everybody's so spread out more or less minus the dugout. So like how much time do you really spend in the dugout at practice or do you really need to? So like that scaling, like that kind of minor gear process really needed to get ramped up in the space that I had and then trying to fit everybody in for what we were able to do. And then mixing that with the strong points and weaknesses of my assistants as well. Like I was not going to stick Josh, at least that first fall. I'm not going to have him run a freshman football session in the anarchy that can be, but sticking with 5 women's golfers who like all in all want to do the right thing. They're just a little bit intimidated in the weight room, which is hilarious, frankly, because Josh is a 300-pound ex-defensive lineman. So it's just like,
Yeah, I
he's
remember
used
him
to
from CVAS, that's why I'm laughing.
yeah. Like that man could get loud. Like he was probably a very kind person, but CVAS, but it's like he's from Louisiana. He can do the inarticulate Louisiana noises, like just straight out of Waterboy. But like putting him in a situation where he's comfortable with it versus I'm going to take the group of 26 athletes that are going through sprints because Josh isn't necessarily going to have the wherewithal to go, you're tugging at your hamstring. You got to stop for the day and get on a bike. Otherwise we're going to pop something off versus I've been doing it for 6 years and I'm not afraid to tell somebody that they got to do this because I've had to go so far as breaking up fights. I've got no issue telling somebody like, hey, it's probably not a good idea for you to do another sprint rep today. Like, yeah, you're right. So weighing all of these factors as much as I can, navigate that complex system, and then trying to make everybody happy. Then adding the class schedule issue into it because it's Division III and there's none.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that.
So, needless to say, I lost a little bit of hair during that time frame, but it's coming back. Shout out H2F. But it's a lot of it's a big multifactorial system that you have even less control of at that level, but to navigate it well, you just got to do what you can, make the best of it. Like somebody's probably going to get pissed off, which then they're not going to be happy with what it is. I just made sure that the people getting the shortest end of the stick were the ones that it was going to have the least effect on competition that we could have. So if you're an in-season team, we're going to give you first priority. We're going to do the right thing to a high level Division I level that we can. And if you're early off season, it's just like you might not be great. Like you might 2 days a week of training might not be the best thing, but it's all the resources I got left for you at that point by the time in season, preseason. And it's like we're here and you're a sport that doesn't necessarily need to train all that much with barbells. It's like, you better get the short. Sorry.
No, keep going. Keep going.
Like, so it's just like, even though like everyone's a priority, but it's like, if everyone's a priority, nobody's a priority. So you got to just do the right thing to make sure. Cause at the end of the day, we're still trying to win games. Like you can feed me that Division III BS all you want, but I was a Division III player. As a player, I was trying to win games. That's what everything I was trying to do was going to do. As a coach, you're trying to win games because that's the ultimate thing. Like there's process goals leading up to the ultimate thing. Like if you stuck me on a field with Jadavian Clowney and Ray Lewis, I'd probably get my ass kicked, but I could still get better over the course of a year, right? So it's like, even if it's a program, like we're not competitive within the conference yet, we still have process goals to get to where we're trying to win. So if what I'm doing is getting in the way of winning, or it's like getting in the way or not helping, then we got to cut it out and move on to something else.
So 2 questions based off of that. One, was that a brand new position they created for you?
At Carleton?
Yeah.
I renamed it. It was a strength and conditioning coordinator position, but I was the 3rd person to occupy it, to my understanding.
Okay. And then my other question is, as somebody who's also type A, how were you able to just truly come to peace and be like, hey, listen, this is the best that I can do? Because again, I know you, and I know that hey, I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm going to do everything. Like, It's so beautiful. And I'm going to steal that and work on that with myself. How did you get to that point for yourself?
Honestly, that was probably working with DeMarco, because there are some things that he quietly, like, DeMarco runs a great program there and they're able to do a lot of high quality detail stuff. But there are some things in working with him that I would have been type A about, but being under his directorship after I would have been type A about it back in 17, 18, 19 when I was the director of the club volleyball place, but then seeing the success that what's actually working at Elon and what they're building and then the big picture of things, like doesn't really matter that those two racks in the corner aren't doing all that great. Like it's just like there's some things where you should be type A and there's some things where it's like, it's all right. It's not the end of the world. Fortunately, with Carleton, there are some teams that were A1 effort. They wanted the best damn product I could give them, so I gave them that. And there was others that were just like happy to have me know their names. And it's just like programming wasn't necessarily all that detailed because it didn't have to be for them. But having seen that, like honestly, having a model of success at Elon, because like I wanted to eventually build a long-lasting developmental program at Carleton. Didn't work out that way, but that was the end goal. And it seems like Nick is doing that very, very well at Elon. But if that's the model of success, working backwards from that, it's like maybe I don't need to worry about X, Y, and Z. I just need to worry a lot more about A, B, and C. Put my effort there and see what happens from there. Which, going back from Division 1 to Division 3 is like you either got to let go something or you're going to go absolutely insane. And I still, because it's just like I had 40 athletes at Elon. I had well over 400 athletes at Carleton that were ultimately my responsibility. So like when you go up a magnitude, like you got to let go of something, otherwise you're just going to be a big old bushel full of apples and losing 98% of them.
All right, so you teed it up perfectly. You went up even higher in magnitude when you now went H2F, right?
Mm-hmm.
You now have even more people. So let's start with why, and then how do you handle even more athletes?
So, and with even less resources for that matter, because we are still growing. It's really
the patron saint of Tall Alex.
Yeah.
My God. Jeez.
I guess handling the scale is just like, well, for one, it's a lot more meaningful work. It's not like, admittedly, like the initial reason that I pulled the trigger on this was not that. Like I started aggressively looking for jobs once I realized that Carleton was not going to pay my intern that like he deserved it. Like Josh Newman was a massive cog in the wheel that was whatever Carleton athletic performance was there. And if you can't find me $25,000 to pay that man, I'm getting the hell out. Like it's so like I was fed one line of things and was given another after a year there, and it was like I'm out. And we can leave this in because that's in a newspaper article that is published at Carleton because my athlete reached out to me to write that. So
I read the article.
Yeah. So admittedly, that wasn't the primary reason, but it is a lot more meaningful work. Like working with individuals that serve our country is very, very meaningful to me. I've had family members that have served in the military, and what that means, especially since we're recording this on Veterans Day, it's like it means it's a lot more meaningful than worrying about what women's tennis tactical periodization is to win a conference. Frankly, like the unit that I'm working with here in Washington at JBLM, part of them have gone forward now. Is like, so every time Kim Jong-un decides to launch a missile, that means a lot more. It's not just some stupid thing on Twitter. Like this is real life now. But with the H2F contractor program and its current iteration, it's like we're locked in at 40 hours a week, which has always been an issue with collegiate strength and conditioning, where it's like, yeah, you're full-time salary exempt. You're going to put in a lot more hours than 40 a week, and not to mention the fact that you're going to get contacted outside of work. Like it's going to be a tough situation. Like you're in an N of one situation where you actually get to leave it at work or not get an email on Sunday at 7:00 at night. And it's just versus here, there's a lot more respect for it because there's an understanding, it's written in stone that we work 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday, federal holidays, those things, which for my mental health and well-being has been very, very good. Navigating like the equipment situations, like it's highly variable. Like the Justin Kuhn, who is like, he was just on the podcast, a friend of ours, he's at a different battalion within the same brigade that I am. And within those two segments, we have vastly different equipment that we have to work with for the populations.
So for anybody, me too, how does that even brigades, battalions, in terms of just your population of athletes? Are you training the same athletes? Are you not?
So brigade level is like brigade is a collection of battalions, and the battalions then have companies, platoons, squads, teams in them. So the level of H2F that I'm embedded at the battalion level. I'm working with Brandon Robinson. We're both responsible for one battalion. Justin and Ryan Gibson are responsible for another battalion within the
Two
brigade.
people for an entire battalion.
Yes. Which seems like ridiculous, but we're not responsible for leading it all. Like the ultimate goal of ours is to, I mean, the NCOs should be leading the sessions. In practicality, like we need to on-ramp them on to like get them to understand what a good strength and conditioning PT session is, which leads to some fun things with higher ups, because the NCO should be leading it. It's like, well, we're not leading all of them. We're leading probably less than 10% of them, but that we need to like introduce exercises, see how it's all done, like how to organize it. There's like how help navigate the problems. Like we're kind of working as a Sherpa to help the NCOs figure out what the lay of the land to get to where they're trying to go, right? So it's not like we're leading 500, 600, 700 soldiers worth of sessions a day. They're like, those all get done during PT hours, but we do program for and try to navigate the logistical problems that they have with equipment and all those sorts of things to make it a productive program. So like, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to be doing with this group, because previously the structure that the battalion that I'm with had, the person in my seat was doing like kind of the big picture stuff. So it's like handling the logistics of it all within what's on base and what's going forward. And Brandon was kind of helping with the specialty stuff, but that kind of all depends on utilization and unit to unit, et cetera. So it's like Justin and Ryan's unit and our unit are two of the higher utilizations right now as a result of great leadership within those battalions. But then other battalions are like, yeah, we don't, like, you can just advise us. You don't really need to like give us a program. It's like, you know, what am I doing here? Is kind of the result that the other ones get. So it all, like the utilization of strength and conditioning in H2F is very unit by unit, level by level. And so sorry, completely diverted. So we're at the battalion level. Above us, we have a brigade lead who supervises the 14 of us. Kind of, I don't think he's technically our boss, but he is. Kind of, he reports up, who reports to our actual boss, the program director, is a civilian working for the DoD's GS position. So we're all contractors, which is a lot easier to cut loose, like, to my understanding. Like the contractor stuff, like it's not like we're just going to get immediately fired, but it's like in order to the position, like if the Army for whatever reason decides that a military contractor isn't necessary, it's a lot easier to cut that loose than it is to cut a civilian DoD employee. So like the guy that's over the top of all of us is really, really hard to remove that position existing, versus government contracting is like, yeah, if it isn't quite working out, we got to remodel it. They can scrap the whole thing and move on to somebody else. But H2F is probably going to be a lot more stable as a result of, like, there's a lot of money going into H2F right now, which is kind of cool. But
how hard is it for you guys? You know, you said boss, so
Yeah.
whether it's that guy that's above all the brigades, or if it is an NCO, or like if it's somebody that's in the military and you're trying to advise them on something and they're like, no, I don't want to do it, kind of like a coach, isn't it easier to be like, yeah, you're a coach, like, listen, like, and try to push back a little bit more, just because again, you're more peers, versus, like you said, you're talking about a service member who may have been in combat, and just again, it's the difference in the power dynamics. How do you handle that, or how had you been advised to handle that?
admittedly, I have not. This is a spot that I haven't been in yet. The first 2 months, more or less, on ramping to H2F isn't really active. So this would probably make for a boring part of the podcast. Just break the fourth wall here. Because I've literally just been getting my CAC card and CAC, the C in CAC is card. I shouldn't go back on that, but it's like getting essentially all the HR stuff, but it's HR moving at the speed of the DMV. So getting your access card to get onto base without a visitor pass, getting a laptop so you can do your work. And it's just like, it's been an evolving process. So I've been on the job for a little under 2 months now, but it's like, I really didn't start programming until yesterday. And like I was able to spot coach, like I was with Justin's unit, and I was able to, like, they're running a session. So it's like they're introducing a session. So I was able to take a couple stations and coach people through that. Still interact with soldiers, etc. But I unfortunately haven't needed to be at the higher level. Yeah, I don't want to do that. I was like, well, I don't really have any power to make you do that. So The thing that I have dealt with is that with soldiers, it's just like it isn't our responsibility to make them try. That's the NCO's problem, which is interesting. So it's like we're kind of in a programming and coaching perspective, but if you coach somebody and they're just kind of a slappy about it and how they respond, like it's not our position to MF them. It's not our position. It's like that's like private first class at being a dickhead. Like you go to their NCO and it's just like, well, so and so is being a dickhead. Like Roger, we'll figure it out. Like that's on somebody else now, which is very nice instead of being like, again, being wholesale responsible for the entire session and everything that happens in that building under that umbrella versus being like, if you don't try, it's not really my like it's not really my problem anymore. Is kind of nice to be a little bit removed from that, which although like you still try to sell it, you sell the benefits of it, you tell them what it is, but it's like if it reaches that other person's brain and it doesn't stick, it's just like I'm not going to lose sleep over it because there's 499 others of you that we could hopefully reach.
No, I mean that's brilliant. And how receptive would you say the soldiers have been? You know, you said it's young. How long has this program been around for? And from people that have onboarded you during the process, what has, you know, again, if any of our listeners are like, man, this is the second guy that's been on, man, like I'm really interested. What have you heard? Again, you made the switch, but what have you heard has been the receptive nature of the soldiers to the program?
It's base by base, leadership by leadership. So I've heard good things going on at Benning, and like
Me
within
too.
our
I've heard nothing but good things about that place.
yeah,
Right?
so Fort Benning apparently is going great. There's some units where they were part of the pilot program, so they've had I think it's 2 years or 3 years to stumble through it and get things right and get the right equipment for it. One of our colleagues is just leaving for 17 Fires, which is another brigade. It's a little bit smaller than ours, so they're not an infantry brigade; they're a field artillery brigade. But they have a full indoor facility with, I think it's like 14 to 20 racks and turf down the middle, and it's like they have less people, so they're able to get like in much larger groups in for true lifting sessions versus us. We're operating outside a lot, which that's all depends on what brigade leadership has decided to allocate towards these things. So and then with that, like goes all the way up to division. It goes up all the way to the corps level, which a division is a group of brigades and a corps is a group of divisions, I believe. So it's like all the way up, big army. We're fortunate that big army like they almost started shuffling our brigade around because we had a group going forward, which at least to me tells me that they see the benefit of having H2F assets embedded with these brigades. Now, whether or not some of that middle leadership that's been in for 20 years, like, oh, I'm fine. What we were doing before is working. It's like as they limp out of the office with 2 ACL surgeries and
like,
a busted ankle.
We got
like,
hired.
yeah. So it's like, well, you're the one that survived, but how many of you have been broken or med boarded or chaptered out as a result of musculoskeletal injuries that have occurred during PT that didn't need to happen? So like that's primarily why we exist, is because most of like the majority of the reason why folks are undeployable is musculoskeletal injury during PT or just like on the job doing non-combat things. It has nothing to do with deployment. It has nothing to do with, you know, the literal chaos that is actual literal war that our people go to. It's not metaphorical war, actual war.
Yeah.
It's just MSKs that happen because they stepped out of a vehicle wrong or they picked up a box wrong, or it's like, so being physically robust to that so they can be more deployable. So with that, it's like the benefit, it's everything that we're doing is moving forward and dropping the MSKs down, but the high level seems that they're bought in on it because there's timelines that stretch out to 2030 to get us into guard units and get us like across the military. So we're very much in the ground level of it. And the individuals that are coming up are kind of on the younger side, and they have actually experienced going through H2F strength and conditioning programming. Is like, this works. I don't feel like crap all the time, and my run times are getting better. It's like, yeah, you can have both. You don't need to feel like shit in order to move forward. Like you can feel good and get better. It's kind of a strange idea.
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, you just gotta tone it down a little bit. You can't redline it all the time. Get in that happy optimal dose category, and try to move forward as we go instead of just getting kicked down a flight of stairs every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. But
So I have a friend of mine who she graduated Ranger School and was, doing all sorts of, PT and had the tests. And my question is, are you guys at the H2F program more concerned or tasked with improving PT times, improving PT tests for soldiers, or is it reducing the musculoskeletal injuries? Like what's the KPI for success for you?
admittedly, but from my contractor, it's been the client being happy with the service, which is,
I mean, shoot, you could say that about all of our jobs.
right. So at least in my mind, if we change nothing else but reducing the MSKs as a result, or musculoskeletal injuries as a result of PT sessions and making sure that we're keeping folks healthier. It's like if the ACFT scores the current Army physical fitness scores, we change nothing there, but they stop getting hurt at PT, that's a win. And it's kind of, frankly, that's where I was at with college strength and conditioning too. Is like, if nothing else, if 100% of us are able to show up to practice for every practice, we're going to have the opportunity to get better at sports. If 100% of us are deployable, that means we're going to be able to at least go to war. Now, whether or not, like, does everybody a super soldier? No, but we're ready to go. Nobody's broken as a result of something. Like, we can dose this the right way. So at least to me, there's that. And then there's, I mean, it all depends on soldier to soldier, NCO to NCO. Oh, the officer in charge was like, well, some of them want to see CFT scores go up. Other folks are just happy that they just don't feel like crap all the time and they're able to do their jobs. Because I'm working with an infantry battalion, which is like boots on the ground, gritty stuff. Like, then there's support battalions where it's office, warehouse, distro, cooks, like fairly, like, by comparison, they don't need to be as physically high speed, right? So they might be down here. So it's just like a workplace wellness program for them, and they don't necessarily care how fast their 2 mile is. Whereas this guy's trying to go to Ranger school and he wants to tick that up. So that's going to be highly variable. But the ACFT is like kind of the main kit for you want a verifiable measure of the things that we're moving forward. That's been the big one. And everybody's all about the run times too, because probably the biggest thing that H2F changes, like if we're broad strokes, at least between the two groups that I've been to and everyone else I've talked to, is that we end up dropping running volumes so much for these folks because they're just like, yeah, we'll run 5 miles on Monday and another 5 miles on Wednesday, and then we'll do a 10 miler on Friday. It's just like, and then they have knees, ankles, hips issues. Like, weird. So they're not prepared for the mileage, but we drop the mileage back down. They start feeling a little bit better, and then the run times still get better. So it's like in their brains, we're just essentially just dealing with a cross-country tapering problem. We're like, I'm not doing enough going into conference. It was like, no, you're actually doing just enough now instead of overloading yourself. So the 2 mile run has been the big indicator of it. And frankly, with the amount of strength training we're able to do, with the amount of we have a limited amount of equipment, the strength power stuff, like if we manage to move the needle on that, it's more of an indicator of how woefully weak they are than it is how successful the programming is, because we're just not able to, like, any 2+ day lift is going to be the exception to the rule, I think, with at least in our situation. There's other situations that might have much better weight strength and conditioning, like setups, barbells, weights, indoor facilities, but we're in the Pacific Northwest. It rains a lot, it's cold, and we don't have a whole lot of barbells and weights, so it's like we're not able to do that as much. So we end up getting a little bit more creative with the strength side.
So here's a question that's probably this could spark a good conversation here.
Yeah.
You were in college,
Mhm.
You're in military. People in college love doing the military training. Elaborate on how that is frankly just wrong and completely misguided. I'll say it. It's my opinion that I think it's misguided when college teams try to bring in a team or a person to do military PT training with their team or their coaches. But you've actually seen it. We've had another guest on that has talked about it. So I'd like your opinion.
The funniest thing to me was I was watching one of Justin's sessions, and they utilized jumping jacks as a warm-up exercise. and the absolute anarchy that ensued. There's no cadence. There's nothing. It was like they just started doing jumping jacks. It was 50 individuals doing jumping jacks with no rhythm, nothing at all. Just like, so the thing that you're supposed to be spelling something out in this hyper disciplined manner, and here we are at the Army where it's like there's a major over there who's talking with somebody, and it's just like it's all loose goose jumping jacks, just like no rhythm, no rhyme or reason, just like doing 20 jumping jacks was like, oh yeah, so all of the things that we've been fed about what the military is it's not this, well, at least it's not true at the base level here. I doubt, and special forces doesn't PT together, so it's, I will say, like, when there's orders, and you go, they do listen to that stuff, but it's like there's no like my second day on the job, so we're doing buddy carries. Justin's probably laughing already. It's like what they're doing buddy carries is feet in the dirt. We're on the parade ground for a brigade, so we're basically digging little trenches in the ground because they're got buddy underneath you, their feet are on the ground, you're digging it. So a major comes up to me. So it's a major in the Army, brigade level guy, is just like, hey, so two things. We're doing a change of command here and like tearing up the grass, just like this kind of, can we not? And second thing, the NCOs should be leading this. I asked one of the guys at the end, just like, who's leading it? They said H2F. And it was like, we just like the calmest day. I've been MF'd so much harder as a former college football player, and even at work. Like, this is a major in the Army in his green suit with every right to just be like jumping down my throat with the new guy. And it's just like even keeled conversation. It's just like, it's like, all right, we got it. Walks away. So like all of this like high strung stuff is just like, yeah, no, I've walked by sometimes and folks get smoked out. Now that's a different thing because it's usually discipline, like a low level disciplinary thing in the barracks. So like that's a different story. But like there's a lot of interaction where it's just like this is the level of like, we need to get this fixed. Roger. I don't know. It's
No.
But with the Army too, it's like I know Justin mentioned just like you're getting Captain America before the super serum. It was like, well, yeah, because like some of them are just warehouse workers. Like there's just because they're in a green suit doesn't make them a badass. It's an IT specialist. Like their job is computers, so it's like they don't necessarily need to be the guy that survives Ranger School, and they have no intent to do that. So you end up with dealing with a broad scope of folks and at least in my case, like coming from Division III, is I had to deal with women's golf, and then I have football offensive and defensive linemen. It's like those are two very different personalities that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and like what the cognitive makeup, it's like the psychological makeup, what they're there for, what drives them. Like you get a economics major who's just like, I'm just here because I like getting good at sports, and you have an exercise science kid who's like, you draw a fitness fatigue curve, and they're just dinner plates absorbing it all. It's like what motivates everybody's going to be different, so reaching everybody's going to be different, right? It's like the support folk who's just ETSing and leaving the military at the end of his contract in 6 months is just like, what's going to motivate him is going to be very different than the guy who's shooting to go to selection or to Ranger School. So trying to reach everybody is going to be a different challenge.
I mean, it sounds like you're very happy over there, and that's awesome. How much of the 4 Ps went into any of your decision-making process when you were leaving and then, going to your current position?
The personal life one was huge because I didn't hit the problem. Like I got left before the problem. Like it was like not paying Josh resulted in me realizing like I've seen this movie before. This results in me getting burned out. I'm not living it. Like I'm getting out. So the personal life, because it's like it wasn't able to see the girlfriend much. Like my parents lived 10, 15 minutes up the road. I was hardly ever to see them at all. It was like just because like you get through a work week's like, wow, there's games on Saturday. Like I should go. Like I live in town. Like there's no reason not to. It's like so like missing out on family things. Like I got tired of missing out on weddings. It's just like I needed to stop doing that. Pay, yep, it's raised in short, especially if you factor in hours worked to dollars made. It's a big win. What was the other one? Professional satisfaction. I mean, for me, it's a new challenge too. Because like college athletics, like I went to every level that isn't Power 5. If you want to differentiate D1, Power 5, and D1, everybody else, which I think is warranted because having interviewed for some positions where it's like, you're going to give me all of that for just the pardon, versus 450 athletes and $7 in good intentions as a budget. So, but it's a new problem. Like it's a very satisfying problem for that matter too. Because like there isn't anything higher stakes than military. I'm probably missing the fourth P somewhere along the way.
Sense of greater purpose.
Yeah, and that's probably touched on that a bit here too, because it's like it's been a shell shock showing up to work and being a weirdo that's in gym clothes and everybody else is in a green suit or just like full military uniform after 9:30. But it's the sense of purpose with it and recognizing that what it is we're trying to do, and the balloon goes up in 72 hours. These guys got to be ready to go. Like there's a gravity to it that strikes me every now and again that this has a lot more consequence than just making sure that we're not fatigued for Saturday afternoon.
I don't think there's a better place to end this right here. Thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us. If anybody wants to follow you or get in touch with you, where can they do so?
So all my social media is just A Brodjeski. So A, B as in boy, RODJESKI. There's only been 2 of me, and the other one is long past, unfortunately. So Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. I'm small enough social media following that I usually get back to people when they DM me, regardless. Just like all 500 of my followers. As far as products go, I'm starting to try to push things a little bit because I have spare time now. Trying to start to get back into the club volleyball space a little bit. So trying to provide programming to them, whether it's big club level or just in-house high school stuff, or just like since that if I had to file myself down to one niche, despite this intensely broad resume I've managed to develop, it'd probably be the club volleyball space. So
awesome, man. Thank you for being here with us again tonight.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
See you.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.